So welcome everybody. It's good to see you. Um, we're going to um, read the 5 mindfulness trainings tonight. And I know that many of you are familiar with them and maybe some of you are not. So let me talk a little bit about what this is before we start to read it. Um, when the Buddha was teaching, he gave 5 precepts, which are things to follow to help us to follow the Eightfold Path. So just these are things that remind us of what we might see or feel or learn in the Eightfold Path. So the first one that he gave was to avoid killing. Some people say do not kill, like we do in the Ten Commandments. But I've read that the Buddha said avoid killing, and I kind of like that better. But doesn't matter. He just really advised us to not participate in any kind of killing. The second mindfulness training is all about um, how we help ourselves and others to obtain happiness. And it's called True Happiness. It's mostly about um, noticing where there is suffering caused by exploitation, social injustice, stealing, oppression, that sort of thing. And so that one is really big on my consciousness right now. The third one is called True Love. It equates with the Buddha's precept about taking care of our sexual energy, avoiding sexual misconduct. I should have said the second precept of the Buddha was avoid stealing. The fourth precept that the Buddha gave was to avoid, let's see, how did he say that? It's about taking care of how we speak, what we say, not to spread lies, not to spread information. And then the fifth one is about, the Buddha said, avoid taking in toxins. And so Thich Nhat Hanh called that nourishment and healing. You have the little folder with the mindfulness trainings in it. And we're going to read those. After each reading, there will be a moment for us to pause and consider, especially for those of us that have taken the 5 mindfulness trainings, for us to pause and consider, have we made an effort to, in other words, our study, observe, and practice it during the last, and it will be 3 months since we did that here. And the reason I really want to do this every 3 months is because you were told when you took the trainings that if you didn't recite or read the 5 mindfulness trainings within 3 months, the transmission would be lost. I talked about this in the weekly newsletter, but I don't know how many people read that, so I'm just going to repeat myself a little bit. Why do we repeat it, and why do we say that the transmission gets lost? Well, I think it's because anything that we do not repeat for that length of time just kind of gets shoved down out of our awareness. Habit energies start to take over, memories, fade, and we kind of lose the awareness of the importance of these ways of being. So I think it's very important to do it at least once every 3 months, which is why we're doing this tonight. There will be time at the end for any questions that you might have, and also for us to discuss these practices. But I would like us to read them through first so that you get a good sense of what the precepts are. Thich Nhat Hanh rewrote the Buddhist precepts for us so that they're relevant, so they're modern, so that they're not religious, they're secular, they can apply to anybody who wants to live in a way that contributes to everyone's well-being. So after each reading, you'll be asked to think about whether you've studied, observed, or practiced them. It's just something for you to reflect on. It's not to beat yourself up and say, oh, I didn't do that. No, it's not about that. We don't ever want to do that. So it's just a reflection. And then there will be a bell, and we'll read the next one. So take your little pamphlet in hand, if you will. And I'm going to read this first part, the 5 mindfulness trainings. The 5 mindfulness trainings represent the Buddhist vision for a global spirituality and ethic. They are a concrete expression of the Buddhist teachings on the 4 Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, the path of right understanding and true love, leading to healing, transformation, and happiness for ourselves and for the world. To practice the 5 mindfulness trainings is to cultivate the insight of interbeing, or right view, which can remove all discrimination, intolerance, anger, fear, and despair. If we live according to the 5 mindfulness trainings, we are already on the path of a bodhisattva. Knowing we are on that path, we're not lost in confusion about our life in the present or in fears about the future. So I'd like for you to read some of these. Is there some students online? I'd like to have one of these people. So while we're waiting for that to come up, I'm just gonna kind of call on you if you don't mind. So Michael, would you? Oh, okay. John, online, do you have a copy of the mindfulness trainings? Can't hear you. Okay. That's a bad idea, I guess.
He does.
Okay, he says he does. All right, John, will you read number 3? All right, I'm gonna assume he's gonna do that. All right. Number 2. Number 1. Let's see. Corey, would you read number 1? And number 2, true happiness. Michael, you want to read that one? And John is going to read number 3. Number 4. Okay, Christina. Number 5. I was longest. Signed up for the longest. Oh, you want to read that one? So let's invite a bell and reverence for life.
Aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of life, I am committed to cultivating the insight of interbeing and compassion and learning ways to protect the lives of people, animals, plants, and minerals. I am determined not to kill, not to let others kill, and not to support any act of killing in the world, in my thinking, or in my way of life. Seeing that harmful actions arise from anger, fear, greed, and intolerance, which in turn come from dualistic and discriminative thinking. I will cultivate openness, non-discrimination, and non-attachment to views in order to transform violence, fanaticism, and dogmatism in myself and in the world.
This is the first of the 5 mindfulness trainings. Have you made an effort to study, observe, and practice it during the last 3 months? True happiness.
Aware of the suffering caused by exploitation, social injustice, stealing, and oppression. I am committed to practicing generosity in my thinking, speaking, and acting. I am determined not to steal and not to possess anything that should belong to others. And I will share my time, energy, and material resources with those who are in need. I will practice looking deeply to see that the happiness and suffering of others are not separate from my own happiness and suffering. That true happiness is not possible without understanding and compassion, and that running after wealth, fame, power, and sensual pleasures can bring much suffering and despair. I am aware that happiness depends on my mental attitude and not on external conditions, and that I can live happily in the present moment simply by remembering that I already have more than enough conditions to be happy. I am committed to practicing right livelihood so that I can help reduce the suffering of living beings on Earth and stop contributing to climate change.
This is the second of the 5 mindfulness trainings. Have you made an effort to study, observe, and practice it during the last month?
Third mindfulness training, true love. Aware of the suffering caused by sexual misconduct, I am committed to cultivating responsibility and learning ways to protect the safety and integrity of individuals, couples, families, and society. Knowing that sexual desire is not love and that sexual activity motivated by craving always harms myself as well as others, I am determined not to engage in sexual relations without mutual consent, true love, and a deep long-term commitment. I resolve to find spiritual support for the integrity of my relationship from family members, friends, and Sangha with whom there is support and trust. I will do everything in my power to protect children from sexual abuse and to prevent couples and families from being broken by sexual misconduct. Seeing that body and mind are interrelated, I am committed to learn appropriate ways to take care of my sexual energy and to cultivate the 4 basic elements of true love: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and inclusiveness, for the greater happiness of myself and others. Recognizing the diversity of human experience, I am committed not to discriminate against any form of gender identity or sexual orientation. Practicing true love, we know that we will continue beautifully into the future.
This is the third of the 5 mindfulness trainings. Have you made an effort to study, observe, and practice it during the last 3 months? Fourth mindfulness training, loving speech and deep listening.
Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful speech and the inability to listen to others, I am committed to cultivating loving speech and compassionate listening in order to relieve suffering and to promote reconciliation and peace in myself and among other people, ethnic and religious groups, and nations. Knowing that words can create happiness or suffering, I am committed to speaking truthfully, using words that inspire confidence, joy, and hope. When anger is manifesting in me, I am determined not to speak. I will practice mindful breathing and walking in order to recognize and to look deeply into my anger. I know that the roots of anger can be found in my wrong perceptions and lack of understanding of the suffering in myself and in the other person. I will speak and listen in a way that can help myself and the other person to transform suffering and see the way out of difficult situations. I am determined not to spread news that I do not know to be certain, and not to utter words that can cause division or discord. I will practice right diligence to nourish my capacity for understanding, love, joy, and inclusiveness, and gradually transform anger, violence, and fear that lie deep in my consciousness.
This is the fourth of the 5 mindfulness trainings. Have you made an effort to study, observe, and practice it during the last 3 months? The 5th mindfulness training, nourishment and healing.
Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful consumption, I am committed to cultivating good health, both physical and mental, for myself, my family, and my society by practicing mindful eating, drinking, and consuming. I will practice looking deeply into how I consume the 4 kinds of nutriments, namely edible foods, sense impressions, volition, and consciousness. I am determined not to gamble or to use alcohol, drugs, or any other products which contain toxins, such as certain websites, electronic games, TV programs, films, magazines, books, and conversations. I will practice coming back to the present moment to be in touch with the refreshing, healing, and nourishing elements in me and around me, not letting regrets and sorrow drag me back into the past, nor letting anxieties, fear, or craving pull me out of the present moment. I am determined not to try to cover up loneliness, anxiety, or other suffering by losing myself in consumption. I will contemplate interbeing and consume in a way that preserves peace, joy, and well-being in my body and consciousness, in the collective body and consciousness of my family, my society, and the earth.
This is the 5th of the 5 mindfulness trainings. Have you made an effort to study, observe, and practice it during the last 3 months? So thank you, dear Sangha. We have completed the recitation of the 5 mindfulness trainings. And now we have an opportunity to investigate and study a little bit among ourselves, to see what we have observed, and perhaps to collect from one another some helpful hints or something that you're kind of disturbed about. So let me read a couple of things before we do that. This is a book by Thich Nhat Hanh. It's called For a Future to Be Possible. In this book, there is an introduction by Thich Nhat Hanh. There is a list of the mindfulness trainings. And then there are many essays by teachers, Buddhist teachers, some of whom are not alive now because this book was published in 1998. And also I might mention that the mindfulness trainings as they appear in this book have changed, which in my view is good because they keep evolving with the times and with our understandings. But I wanted to read to you this because it always comes up. I'm thinking about a friend, Lindy, who was in the Wednesday night group a long time ago. And so we read these one Wednesday night, and after we were done, she said, "That's a lot of words." And it is. It's a lot of words and it's a lot of instruction, so to speak. It's a lot of guidance. And so it can be a little bit, not maybe overwhelming, but it can be kind of daunting to take it all in. So one time, Ty was asked apparently, what is the best way to practice the precepts? He didn't call it the mindfulness training, same thing though. He says, I do not know. I am still learning along with you. I appreciate the phrase that is used in the 5 precepts to, quote, learn ways. We do not know everything, but we can minimize our ignorance. Confucius said, to know that you don't know is the beginning of knowing. I think that this is the way to practice. We should be modest and open so we can learn together. We need a sangha, a community to support us, and we need to stay in close touch with our society to practice the precepts well. So he also went on to say that many of the problems that we are dealing with did not exist at the time of the Buddha. And so we have to look deeply together in order to develop the insight that we need to help us in this present time. So let's talk about the first one, reverence for life. What are your thoughts? What came up for you? Just let me know that you want to talk and speak out. Yes, Jax.
To me, a question arises, and that is, like, does this teaching imply that one, well, there is no should, I know that, but would being vegetarian be on the right path, or is that not what this implies at all?
That is a great question, and it comes up a lot. And in this book, Sister Cheng Kong wrote a part of the book that's called Commonly Asked Questions. So here it is. If I take the first precept, does it mean I have to become a vegetarian? And she says, Thich Nhat Hanh asks us to practice mindfulness deeply every time we eat or drink. If we do so, we may find that our appetite for meat and fish begins to diminish. The important thing is to be aware of what we consume. And she says, I have met people who cannot be vegetarian because of medical reasons, but who respect life more than many vegetarians. Some vegetarians are too extreme and are unkind to those who cannot give up meat eating. I am more comfortable with a meat eater than an extremist vegetarian who is filled with self-righteousness. Sister Cheng Kong never, she always just says exactly what's on her mind. But I love that because it helps us, I think, understand the intent behind each of these. And that is the important thing, the intent. So any other comments or questions about the first?
Paula?
I was mindful of, I was in my yard the last few weekends and pulling weeds. I don't like to put the chemicals down or anything like that. And what I noticed, I was pulling these clovers. So these red clovers were kind of invading on the grass. And when I was down pulling them, I saw that there were a lot of bees in the clover. And that I thought, wow, there are a lot of bees, like these little bees. And I thought, well, we need more bees. What am I doing? I'm not like allowing that. So I cultivated an area. So I put different sections to where I left the clover in. And then still, you know what I mean, had some of it out, you know, where the grass was. So it was like, and in my mind, it was like, why do I do this anyway? And then I was looking at like the dandelion leaves and was like, wow, dandelions really is really good tea, you know, dandelion leaf. And so then I left some of the, you know, dandelions too, and they were like really pretty. And it was just like, it really made me think, how am I thinking and where did that thinking come from? Just because everybody's yards needed to look a particular way or be groomed a particular way, to be closer to the earth, to see what I'm nurturing, you know, in the ground. So anyway, that was my awareness this past month around the first mindfulness training.
Thank you. It's another way to do selective watering. Great, thank you for that. Any other comments or questions about the first one? All right, let's move to the second one, true happiness. We might be able to spend the whole time talking about this one because it begins by making us aware of suffering caused by exploitation, social injustice, stealing, and oppression. Let me say, while you're thinking about what you want to say, every one of these trainings starts out with aware of the suffering caused by something. And then later on, Ty gives us a remedy, something we can do. It begins by, I will practice looking deeply. And then he goes a little further when he says, he talks about commitment. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but he says, in this one, he says, I am committed to practicing right livelihood. So each of the mindfulness trainings is tied to one of the Noble Eightfold Path, or maybe more than one. So you can see the link between the mindfulness trainings and the Noble Eightfold Path. So any comments about true happiness?
And then going in, I work as a medical interpreter for Parkland, and currently I'm working at a pediatrics clinic. And I work with the Spanish speaking community, obviously, and they tend to be immigrants that had to cross many countries, go through many countries. And I often enough hear stories about how one way or another they were trafficked, or they were used in a way like kidnapped and then asked for ransom. And so it makes me think of how I need to be very aware of where they are, the words that I'm using, and try my best to put myself in their situation, because I do find that some doctors are desensitized and they lose their patience. And so I've been particularly aware of the importance of my job, and also with the latest politics with Trump and then going out.
Thank you, Adon. It sounds like as you were talking, I thought about this part that says, I'm committed to practicing generosity in my thinking, speaking, and acting. Thank you. Yes.
Jim Bellingham. As I read this, one thing that I struggle with and I'm working on for my own development is that my history as a lawyer and teacher, I'm a very judgmental person. And I tend to, when someone presents a different belief, practice, or balance, my first thoughts were always, well, how could you have that? And try to talk them out of it. And then I've come to realize that what I'm doing is judging by, that wouldn't make me happy, so how can it make you happy? And I'm trying to be more generous, and show compassion, generous, and acceptance, and trying to be aware to say, well, if that works for you and bring you happiness, then I bless it, or I encourage it, rather than judge it by my own standard.
Yeah.
That's very difficult.
Thank you, Jim. Yes, we all have our biases and prejudices. And it can be uncomfortable when they show up, but it's also a good wake-up call to recognize what's happening. Any other comments about this one? Someone usually says, I am aware that happiness depends on my mental attitude and not on external conditions. And that I can live happily in the present moment, simply by remembering that I already have enough conditions to be happy. That is also kind of difficult when you're in a situation that's challenging. But I have used this myself and I know it works. Just to look around and see how much in my immediate environment is wonderful, just looking around here, I see the ivy, the Buddha, I see you, and this community, it's like, well, yeah, that's enough conditions to be happy right now. All right, the third mindfulness training is about, basically about sexual misconduct or misuse of our sexual energy. Any comments about that? This is one that was recently rewritten.
What was the change? Anything major?
The change is, it occurred down in kind of in the middle where it says, I resolve to find spiritual support for the integrity of my relationship. Previously, it said, I will not have, it was something about not engage in a relationship without the consent of, no, that's not right. But anyway, it had something to do with having the blessing of your family and
Taking the community into account.
yeah, but just, it only said community.
The primary
it said-
addition was like with whom there is support and trust. So before it was like not gonna engage in any sexual relations without the blessing of my family, essentially.
Yeah.
And they were like, not everybody has trust and support from their family, right? So that's not a good blanket guideline. So they kind of clarified, like, wherever you can find support and trust, that's where you go.
Yeah.
Support and trust, making this.
To do it,
Thank you.
not a slapdash sort of impulsive to account for others.
Yeah, thank you. I've read it so many times this way, I kind of forgot whether. That's what happens, they kind of fade away. I like the last, down near the bottom, 4 basic elements of true love. This is what we just chanted. The Brahma Viharas, loving kindness, compassion, joy, and inclusiveness.
No, and what is interesting about the wording of this one, and this often in I'll say spiritual or religious community, this part of human experience seems to be squashed. Or we don't talk about that. And when we do, it's rules and restrictive. Whereas what I like about this, it is open to knowing this is a real part of human experience and human right livelihood, and to address it openly and without rules and restrictions, instead of being an open part of our human experience.
Recognizing that you are not the sinner. Um, So, and then also there, near the end, he says, recognizing the diversity of human experience, I'm committed not to discriminate. Well, and there's more to that, but discriminating is putting people in boxes and, you know, describing what you think that box means. I've heard recently, and a lot of times this, people are using this word othering, meaning putting somebody in a category that makes them other than what you are. It's another us versus them kind of discrimination. And that's at the basis of a lot of these problems. The fourth mindfulness training, anything you want to say about that one? This one is about mindful speech. Starting out with aware of the suffering caused by unmindful speech and the inability to listen to others. This kind of goes along, Jim, with what you were saying. It's very similar.
Then going in, I just thought about that as I was coming in to the center, because the driver that brought me here had her child in the vehicle, which is not professional. Like, she's not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
And so I was struggling to, because I didn't know what the most compassionate thing would be, to just let it go or to report her. Because I would be listening to myself if I report her. And that's something that I've been working on, just listening to myself more, rather than just let things go or be as they are. Like, so I've been struggling with that. Listening to myself and just do what is the right thing to do. How that go?
Although again, yeah, I kind of have a similar situation. There's a community that I'm part of, and I feel like somebody was treated unfairly in a kind of public way. And I've been kind of wrestling with like whether I want to call out, you know, the leaders of the group for doing that. And this was really good for me to hear, because it's like, I am determined not to utter words that can cause division or discord. So I'm not like looking to go in and like pick a fight, but also I feel like somebody needs to call them out on this unfair treatment. So it's like, how do we find that balance of when you feel like somebody's behaving improperly? I think that is a place for a little bit of conflict of being like, hey, you know, just to call it out, like this, we're not all okay with this. What you're doing has ramifications that may not be acceptable to everyone involved, without just being kind of unnecessarily.
Yeah. There's a sentence in here that says, I will speak and listen in a way that can help myself and the other person to transform suffering and see the way out of difficult situations. I'm thinking about an incident when I was visiting down in Sinton with my brother and his wife. My brother has passed away since then, but he was struggling with depression, and he had fluid on his brain, so he wasn't thinking very well. It was sad. And so he forgot to take his medicine. He would forget something. And one time, Margie, I didn't mean to use her name, but anyway, she spoke to him in what to me was just a very unkind way, like something like, did you remember to close the barn door? Or, something like that. And I struggled with, do I say something to her about that? Because it really, really bothered me. That was my baby brother. And so I thought about it a long time, and I remembered, thankfully, to use deep listening and loving speech. And so when there was an opportunity, we were both sitting at the table. Dawn was off doing something else. And I said to her something like, I know that you are a very loving and caring person. So first I want to I wanted to acknowledge that because she had been taking care of him for a couple of years. And so, then I said something like, I know this is difficult. And, I just really wanted her to know that I understand. And then finally I said, I think there was probably a better way for you to ask Don that question. And she was defensive at first. She said, well, what might I have said? And I said, well, you might have said, in a different tone of voice, you might have said, Don, I think I see that the barn door is open. And I don't know if it was the same day or maybe the next day, she did something like that, very similar. So I felt good about that because I felt like she wasn't suffering anymore. I didn't think Don was suffering anymore, and I certainly wasn't. But that's what it takes, it's like you have to kind of water the good seeds or the good clover and then find a way to express whatever is distressing. And hopefully it will have an outcome like mine did, but maybe it won't. You don't ever know. Any other comments about that one or questions?
Like to bow in, that just reminds me that so many reactions come from people's own suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we may have, and it's so complex, so I hope I can say this and it comes out the right way. But sometimes our own need for a strong sense of justice may make a complex situation too simple.
Mm-hmm.
And so that word cultivate, when I reread this, there's a lot of inner thinking before you respond.
Mm-hmm.
Because you might be responding to another person's suffering as well. This is complex.
Yeah, and that's why it's called loving speech and deep listening. Yeah. Thank you, Corey. Anything else? Okay, what about the fifth one? Nourishment and healing. This one is packed with a lot of stuff. Recently, we read these in the Wednesday night group. We do this just so you know, if you're interested, on the first Wednesday of every month in the Inner Being Sangha, we read these and talk about them. So one of the persons who read, or maybe she just commented, she said that she was reading this again. She recognized that she is kind of covering up some things like loneliness or anxiety by consuming. And, you know, I do that sometimes too. But, you know, consuming, if you're doing it because it seems to satisfy some other need, then it's never finished. You know, it's never enough. So I think that's why this is said, I'm determined not to cover up loneliness, anxiety, or other suffering by losing myself in consumption. So that was one that really came up for most of us on Wednesday night. What about you? Anything come up for you?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
no, you go ahead.
About it. I'm thinking of how that phrase of like, watch who your friends are because they'll have an impact on you. It's that same idea of when you really start to look at it, you know, scrolling, and people are saying, oh, I got my haul of whatever it is. And it's like, that literally impacts your brain to think that's normal. That every 2 weeks you need a big box of 10 outfits in it. You know, what you consume impacts who you are, just like the friends that you choose to be around. So just to have a little self-check of the books and the, you know, podcasts and the whatever it is that you're taking in can impact how you view what's normal.
Yeah.
So thank you for letting me go first. That was
Jax, you want to continue?
Yeah, and not ingesting toxins is very hard. Being sober, is a little bit hard, but I'm able to do it. But, as you can see, I have this very unattractive necklace. It's because, I'm trying to cut back on, vaping, and obviously that's a toxin. So it's something, unfortunately, when something is an addiction, you literally, at a certain point, there is habit energy, but at a certain point, like there's chemical addiction. So you kind of have to go off very slowly. As much as I'd like to go cold turkey, that's not really possible. So it's more of I'm trying to ingest less toxins right now, which is something I'm obviously working on really hard. But I have to recognize the progress I've made. In terms of like mind altering substances, I'm not consuming anything, which is great. It's just this one thing. So I'm pretty close to being toxin free. And I have to remember that toxins aren't only like substances, they can also include foods and other things. So I also have to keep in mind the progress that I've made,
Yeah.
which is great. Even if I'm not 100% there. But yes, that's something I'm definitely working on. Especially, I'm trying to cut consumption before I go to bed because I don't want it to impact my REM sleep. So I try to stop by 4 or so. So I'm already cutting down consumption in that way. But I'm also just trying to be more mindful about it. I've talked with my therapist about it. It's just being more mindful about the act of just like, I don't know, bringing like the hand motion and yeah, that kind of thing. And that's kind of why I got this to replicate the motion, which is helpful because it's not mindful at all. It's just an act that I do.
Yeah.
So I'm finding methods to try to make it more mindful.
Great. That's good. And I like that you're using loving speech for yourself. I mean, it's so easy when when you're trying to, cut some habit, some deep habit that you know is not good for you. It's so easy to say, oh, you stupid person, why can't you give this up, but you're not doing that, which is great. The other way is very counterproductive. If you're not consuming to support that habit, then you might end your denigrating yourself. If you're judging yourself, people then will consume to take care of that problem, so that's great. Anything else?
Share. On this one, there was a monk who was listening to who he made a joke about that last one. That was a good joke about it, and but to point out the connection of all of these trainings, and I don't want to take away from the connection by just but with this joke, but it was really an important one because it was talking about toxins and thinking of chemical toxins and why we shouldn't take them in. And he said, because when you take in too many toxins and you become inebriated, all the rest of them go out the window. And you do all the other ones. And there was this joke, not told as well as the monk could say, who's taken a vow for his life. But when I think of what Corey's point was about putting it in modern terms of what we call sometimes also doom scrolling, scrolling through TikTok, social media, all that, just consuming whatever's there. It really riles up my the way I speak to others, because I use that as an example of, well, I guess if they're saying this, I'm going to say that. So there's 4. Number 4, number 3, what you said, putting people in boxes. It's like, yeah, I'm with them. No, not them. I think. And 2, definitely the depriving people of their dignity or respect. And then 1, I think we're always in the act of even not killing a person or whatever, or that we all can kill someone's drive, their initiative. Yeah. Anyway, so all of these connect, and this 5th one is just really, I think, a big one, tactful.
Anything else? Thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts, and I hope it was helpful to you. I want to just reiterate something I said last time we did this. It can be daunting to even read one of these and try to do it, consistently and inclusively and all of that. But if you just take one sentence or even a phrase from any of these and practice with it for, let's say, a week, you'd be surprised how much difference that can make. For instance, I'll just give you a sample. So we talked about this, but if you just took this sentence, knowing that words can create happiness or suffering, I am committed to speaking truth. Just that much. That, if something, or, pick out some other phrase from here that you want to practice with. And I hope you'll take these home. We can always print more. And that way you can, refer to it whenever you want to. But if you don't want it, please leave it and don't go and put it in the recycle bin. So, thank you all so much. This was lovely. I hope it was helpful to you.